Hello and welcome to the CAPE podcast. CAPE standing for the Child Abuse Prevention and Education Podcast. My name is Kristi McVie and I am an ex-West Australian police officer who spent 10 years with the police where I was trained as a specialist child interviewer and a child abuse detective. This podcast is all about sharing what I learnt, saw and knew whilst investigating child sexual abuse in the police force. It is also about sharing the knowledge that I gained in that time that helped me with my own parenting of my then 2-year-old daughter. My mission is to help share my knowledge and to help you in your role as parents to keep your kids safe, along with guest experts in the field of child abuse prevention and education, both in person and online. Thank you so much for joining in on the fight to prevent child sexual abuse. Your kids will thank you for it. Welcome back to the CAPE podcast, the Child Abuse Prevention and Education podcast. I am so super excited to be with the amazing Carol Todd today. Carol is all the way over in British Columbia, Canada, which makes it very interesting to book in a podcast interview with time zone changes and all of the things, but it worked out well today on this Sunday. Carol, I'm going to let Carol tell you all about who she is and what she does and why we're having this conversation. But first of all, I want to explain how I met Carol. So last year I went to a conference hosted by the Queensland Police and Task Force Argos. And if anyone hasn't heard who they are, Task Force Argos are the leading police force in the world almost on identifying children who are in child exploitation material and child abuse material. And they work with all the worldwide leading experts in, finding children and seizing and finding these people who do this harm to kids. But that's how I met Carol. Carol was the first speaker on the first day, and her story is so impactful and so it left I was very blessed to have met her, and we've kept in contact. And so here we are. So thank you for being here today, Carol.
Well, thanks for reaching out and reconnecting. I think it's great that you can meet people from different parts of the world and still keep in touch. And that is, of course, one of the good things that technology has been created for.
Yeah.
Right. It's an aside. I mean, we're going to talk about some of the darker sides of technology. But that experience in Australia, I keep talking about it. That was one of, I think, since I've been on this journey, since my daughter died, and she was, the online harassment and exploitation, that conference in Australia was one of the most profound ones I've ever spoken at.
Yeah.
So
that's good. It's good that you look. I mean, who would have thought? And I'm sure you didn't think that, with Amanda. So just for anyone listening, Carol Todd is the mother of Amanda Todd and she's the founder and creator of the Amanda Todd Legacy. And I'll get you to explain Amanda's story in a moment, but Carol has been traveling. Who would have thought that you would be traveling the world and talking about Amanda's story? And coming to Australia, like, it had a profound impact on myself. I mean, I had to speak to you and I had to connect with you, and we had a few conversations, and so I'm just so grateful that you shared that you came to Australia, and that we can, and like you said, it's one of the good things about the digital world is being able to reconnect and connect with people, and that's one of the good things about it.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. And part of, I think, like Amanda's legacy is to ensure that her story continues to be told out there. When the exploitation and the sextortion was happening to her, and you know what, she also had to deal with bullying and cyberbullying amongst her real life peers, right? So she had a whole bunch of things happening to her. But if she was watching all of us, I think she would be very proud that her story has created so much conversation. When she died, sextortion wasn't even one of those words that we were aware of.
Yeah.
Right. It was just called exploitation. and we didn't even consider it child sexual abuse at the time. Technology facilitated child sexual abuse, right? So she has done so much in life and in death, and I just I give my appreciation and love to my daughter because she created that video 5 weeks before she passed, and that video has been seen, I don't know, 50 million times around the world. And if you type it in, like, there's lots of kids around the world who are doing projects on cyberbullying or child sexual abuse or whatever, and her video will come up, and she has basically shared her entire story in 8.5 minutes. And even in the trial against her, when her predator was brought to Canada to stand trial, they showed it in court, right? And it became Amanda's testimony, even though she
Wow.
wasn't with us. So
Wow.
that's how profound that this is. And I always walk around going, who would have thought? Right?
Who would have thought? Yeah.
Who would have thought?
I guess for a lot of Australians, I had first heard of Amanda when I worked with another organisation, and they used part of her video as for children in school to educate them about, sextortion, exploitation, cyberbullying, etc. So for anyone who hasn't heard about Amanda and her legacy and what you are doing now, can you give us a brief rundown of when it all happened and just obviously the story? Because yes, they can go on YouTube, and I really do recommend people to go on YouTube and look up Amanda Todd Legacy, or it is under Amanda Todd Legacy, isn't it?
Well, if they go to Google and they go and type in Amanda Todd Legacy, it'll bring you to our website. And on our website, the video is right there on the front page.
Awesome.
So that might be easier than searching.
Searching.
Yeah. And I've also realized over the years about how I've told Amanda's story. And so it stretches. Sometimes it's detailed, and now it's more compacted.
Yes.
Right. So for those listeners who don't know Amanda's story, Amanda was how do I start? Where do you start in this? She was a active, inquisitive, curious child.
Yep.
From the day she was born. And she had a passion for singing and art and physical activity. Academics wasn't her strength, and we realized that when she was 6 years old, and we found out that she did indeed have a learning disability. And so it answered a lot of questions. And so the disability basically was more language processing, which, when you think of the language processing, as she grew up into preteen, teenhood, and the conversations that happen, you know how fast girls can talk, right?
Yeah.
Well, Amanda was missing pieces of that because of her processing. But being proud, she would never admit that she didn't understand everything, and she couldn't converse, like she couldn't express herself in the way she wanted. So things came out that people got upset. Her passion was singing, and somehow she learned how to video record herself singing and learned how to post it on YouTube. Now, these were the days when, like, she didn't really get her first iPhone until she was 15. So she was using a regular cam recorder, right? That you had to plug in USB to computer and upload. And so she was doing those kinds of things.
Old school.
So old school. And that tells you how far back we go. So back in 2000, and I don't know, she was probably about 12, and she was uploading videos of herself singing, like just Justin Bieber, I can't even remember. Was Taylor Swift around that time of it, right?
Just new,
Maybe
yeah, maybe.
just new, right? Katy Perry, like she was singing cover songs and then uploading, and getting comments, because you could comment. I don't think back then you could actually close all your comments in YouTube. And so they were coming and they were flattering,
Yeah.
right? You're a great singer, you're really pretty. Can you sing more? Unbeknownst to all of us, who was on the back end. And so, like, this was back in, she died in 2009, right?
Wow. Right at the beginning,
And
right at the
so
beginning of all of this stuff.
right at the beginning, and who, as parents, how much did we know about the internet back
Not
then?
enough.
I certainly didn't know everything about the dark world, right? It was more of, in real life, don't share personal information, don't talk to people you don't know, like on the street, be careful of
Yeah.
what you see out in your community. Didn't even faze me to have the conversations like we're having now back then. And so this person who was, or there was a bunch of people, but there was one specific person that continued to groom Amanda, to flatter her, right? And eventually, like, he told her he was a 15-year-old boy. Eventually down the road, we came to realize that this one person had 22 aliases he was using, 22 profiles on social media that he was using to talk to Amanda with.
Wow.
And so he would flip one on, like flip a profile on, flip a profile off, and then go back and talk to her. Eventually he convinced her that, she was such a great singer to come into a room and sing for my friends. And now we know what kind of rooms they were, right? And then he built the trust, and eventually they were, I guess, in a room, and he asked her to lift up her shirt, and she did, and he took a screen capture of it at that moment. And then the threats started, that he wanted more. He wanted more pictures, he wanted more videos. And when Amanda eventually kept saying no, he said, if you don't do it, then I'm going to share your images and videos amongst your family, amongst your Facebook friends. Because there was only Facebook back then. There was Facebook, there was, what was it? There was YouTube, Facebook, there was
MySpace?
email, MySpace, there was
Yeah.
MySpace. And then there were some darker
Yeah.
like websites that I think Amanda eventually funneled down into, right? And so as soon as she wouldn't, then he shared it. And I remember that the night that I got the email of her image, and another family saw it, that called the police, and they came to do a wellness check, and that was the start of a sort of investigation. Right?
Police didn't know what to do with things like that back then.
No, they didn't. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the capacity to go into a different country to do investigations. Or, I mean, now when you look at all the resources out there worldwide to go and search with a case file, like Canada goes to the US, Canada goes to Australia, Canada goes to the EU now, and they're all working together as best they can, right? But back then, it was like, it's VPN, we can't do anything, we can't find it, right? So eventually, this lasted from 2009 to 2012, that this person continued to communicate with Amanda. And as soon as her image came out to her peers, even the conversation to kids back then, it wasn't as in-depth as it is now, right? And so there was a lot of bullying face to face. There was a lot of cyber bullying amongst her peers, a lot of shaming, a lot of judgment, a lot of name calling. And you know what, when you're doing that to a 13-year-old, they can't handle it. Their brain capacity just doesn't, they just want to be friends with everybody, right?
Yeah.
But the kids were mean. They were, and mean isn't
They're
just
vicious.
That's a light. They're vicious, right? And so when Amanda moved to a different community with their dad, I guess kids like with social media, they know each other from everywhere.
I know.
Right? You'd have to move to a different country, basically. And so when Amanda moved to a different community and a new school, it started all over again because it had spread of what Amanda had did, right? And I think now kids look at it, they still shame and they still judge, but they don't shame and judge like they did back when this was happening to Amanda.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she was tormented for 2.5 years, and she created her video in September of 2012, and just to share her story. And unfortunately, in October of 2012, she died by suicide. It was just a lot. And even when you talk about mental health, and I got her the help she needed, but what she was looking for was support from, I guess, a support group from peers that were struggling too. And there weren't any back then. There's lots now. You can even find support groups online. And so it was just one thing after another that just built up in her life that made her falter, right? And then so after her death, about a year later, so when Amanda died, her suicide death was highly visible. It was high profile because of she had created this video, and that video that had 300 views the day before she died jumped up to 1 million 24 hours after she died, and hence her story got shared all over the place. And her death was just, I guess they labeled it as cyberbullying and bullying as a result of, right? Everyone had forgotten about the online predator, and the police had closed the file. And then in 2014, I got a call that said they had actually caught someone, and through Facebook records, they had linked Amanda's profile to this predator's, and he lived in the Netherlands.
Wow.
And he was also victimizing other young girls, right? Like he had a whole scheme going on. So they charged him, and at the time, Canada decided that they wanted to trial him, bring him to court separately, and bring him to Canada. So that took 10 years.
I know.
It finally came to fruition the summer of 2022. In the meantime, he was brought to trial in the Netherlands for his other victims, and he was given 11 years for that in the Dutch courts. And then in summer of 2022, he was held on trial out here in Vancouver, and he was charged with 5 charges: criminal harassment, 2 charges of child pornography, exploitation, and communicating with a minor. And it was a 9-week trial. I went as her mom every day to the courthouse. I saw Aiden Caban, the back of his head, every day. He had pleaded not guilty, of course. And I was truly scared that the jurors would get so confused over the evidence, because it was a lot of explaining what technology was and what he did and how
Mm,
the experts found him. But the good thing is that jurors found him guilty, and he got 13 Canadian years. And just last December, so when you get Canadian years, and under a treaty agreement, Canada had to send him back to the Netherlands, and the 13 years had to be transferred to the Dutch
mm.
judicial system.
And what was that?
And last December 2023, the Dutch converted it to 6 years.
Well, better
I
than
know,
nothing,
you
but
know
at the
what?
same time, wow,
I
the
know, but
struggle.
if you have to look at it in a different point of view, there was conversation that he may not have gotten any Canadian, like he may have gotten zero, just
Yeah,
the way it was being converted, right? And that he had already done the crimes a while ago. So when you think of it, he got 11 years the first time in his first trial, and he got 6 years for Amanda's. So you put 11 and the 6 together and you get 17. That's a long time. So
yeah.
he's still sitting in prison.
Thank goodness for that. We don't want him out because he's a vicious
And
human.
and you know what, Amanda, it's been 11 and a half years since Amanda died. She would have been 27. And we still talk about her as a current story.
Yeah,
And so that's one of the good things, and that's why you and I are here talking.
yeah.
But if she hadn't made the video, we wouldn't be here talking, because she would have just become another statistic.
I know. And we're seeing and hearing so many young people taking their lives because of this, because of sextortion, because of, bullying online, because of all of the things that are happening that our kids don't have the capacity to deal with.
I know. And now with the sextortion and the boys, right? There's traditional sextortion and there's financial sextortion.
Mm,
And the financial sextortion with the boys, it's all about the money aspect. I watched a video. Funny enough, I watched a video created by, I think it was the Scottish or the Irish police. And it was created like 8 years ago, and it was about sextortion.
really?
And so what happened is, like, I don't think we took it, no one took it seriously as
Yeah.
a teaching point, until recently, until these rings in Nigeria or in Thailand, they started getting the boys, right? It's been happening to girls
Forever.
for a really long time, but it took it happening to boys, which makes me angry to a little bit, right?
Yeah.
To heighten it, because if you look, I have my Google alerts set, right? And it's all about the financial sextortion and the boys, and 91% of reports now are from boys. And it's like, my message is, if you have a girl, please don't stop talking about this, because it's still
No.
happening to the girls.
Yeah, I agree. And interestingly, the 2022 Internet Watch Foundation, their report, and I don't know if you've seen it, but their report was that around 96% of all of so they're based in the UK, and they get all of these child exploitation material, and they get like all of this stuff sent to them, and then they assess it, they send it off to the correct places if they can locate where the child is based, because obviously behind every video and every movie and photo is a child that needs help. And so they'll send it off, but they'll also do a report. And in that 2022 report, 96% of all of the videos that they received were of girls, and young girls, as unfortunately from birth up to 17. And but the largest group of girls that were being exploited, and when we're talking, there's multiple categories of exploitation, right? So there's the self-generated child exploitation material, which is where the young person takes the video or photo of themselves. versus the other one where the adult who is abusing the child takes the video or photo. And there's 96% of girls, they were taking their own videos and photos, and the largest group that were taking them were aged between 7 and 10 and 11 and 13. So what we're seeing is our young people, because we're behind the ball, and because we haven't kept up with what's happening, our little girls are being exploited, and they had something like 250 something thousand reports in 1 year, and it was like 96,000 7 to 10-year-olds, and the 11 to 13-year-olds was double that. And it was just, we need to be mindful that it's not just boys. Yes, boys are being targeted by that financial sextortion, but our little girls and our young girls are being just as exploited, but it hasn't had the same spotlight on it because, like you said, boys versus girls. And girls, interestingly, when I go into a classroom, and Carol, you're also a teacher and you teach now digital literacy, and you go out and talk about this stuff. Our girls, they seem to know that this is happening and just shrug it off. Some of them, they're like, oh, well, it just happens. And it's a little bit less, like, oh my God, shock and horror. How could this be happening? But it's almost like it's expected.
Well, and I think, I shared a story with you. Someone shared a story with me, a grandma, and this was just last week. And she said her granddaughter, who's in grade 6, shared with her that her and her friends group had become aware of Amanda's story. Now, whether it was a school presentation or I really don't know, but the friends group all talked about it. They went online and did some deeper researching on it. And what this granddaughter said to her grandma was, you know what? We all talk about how we don't want what happened to Amanda to happen to us. So we are being more careful online, and we are learning how to be safer online, which is great. You know
Amazing.
what? I'm so glad that happened. And actually, another friend of mine who has a son in grade 7 had a presentation just last week, and Amanda's story was featured. And he said, he actually raised his hand and said, my mom knows Amanda's mom. But he came home and he chirped, he reiterated everything that he had learned in that presentation. And so presentations are great, follow-up are great, but a lot of the kids that know and understand what they need to do to be safer online also get that conversation at home, right? It's not just school. It has to come from home, the community, billboards. They just need constant reminders of what they need to do to stay safe online. And unfortunately, they need to be told what can happen on the dark side. And I hate being so negative Nilly, right? But sometimes, like, Amanda's is a real story, and you've got real stories that have happened in Australia too, with online illicit behaviors. But we need to share those with our kids. And what I've learned is we need to tell our kids why we're talking about certain things. It's just like if your child does something and you take away their cell phone without telling them why, they're going to get upset and angry. Or you want to put privacy settings on your child's device without telling them why. The why calms everyone down, and it gives good reasoning. Now, the other part is, yes, we have to talk about the abuses that happen online, the cyberbullying, the exploitation, the privacy. But we also have to talk to our adults and our parents about what to do as your child is growing up, and what to do before you even give them a device.
Yeah.
Right? The education has to go to the parents. And I'm not shaming parents, but 7 and 8-year-olds don't need their own device. Family devices, where mom and dad and or caregivers can have access,
Yeah.
but kids don't need their own devices because those devices are computers. And I think that's part of the unawareness is
Mm.
that, oh yeah, they can take pictures, they can get on these apps, they can, but it's a full-blown computer that you carry around in your pocket,
Mm.
right? And that everyone can have access to you. And so oftentimes when I go and I talk to school age kids and I say to them, so if you're home and someone knocks on your door, are you going to let that person in? And
Mm.
it first answer is no, right? That I don't know that person. It's a strange person. Why would I let them into my house? Well, why not? Why just invite them in and have some hot chocolate or right? And they still say no. And then it's like, okay, so you're on your device and you're talking to whomever on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram through messaging,
Yeah.
right? And you're letting them into your bedroom, you're letting them into your kitchen because all of a sudden everything is open. And then you see this little light bulb go on,
Mm.
right? That um, there is there is no difference. When you don't know somebody, don't let them into your life,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's through a screen or through your front door. There has to be, maybe analogies is the way that we teach parents to talk to their kids with.
Yeah, and whilst you were saying all of that, I was thinking like at the moment Taylor Swift is in Australia, right? It's like throwing your kid into the middle of a 96,000 a person stadium with 96,000 other people, putting your kid in the middle of it and leaving them there. Because really, that is what it's like being on the internet. You have access to billions of people, good, bad, and ugly. Doesn't matter. There's billions of people on the internet. It doesn't matter which demographic you come from. Everyone in the world almost has a phone and or a device. Not everyone, but almost. And so, throwing your kid into that environment with no safety, no supervision, no awareness, it's trouble.
There are 3.96 billion people on social media every day,
Wow. That's, yeah, a
right?
lot.
And all it takes is one
Yeah.
to come knocking on your screen,
Yeah.
right? Our kids are fish in a big goldfish pond, and some kids are have some kids have the cognizance to ignore,
Mm.
right? But some kids, because they're social beings, and if you ask a child, what is the one thing that you love about your device and about using social media or whatever, and they'll say talking to other people.
Yeah. It's because connection.
Unfortunately,
They're seeking
it's
connection.
connection. And unfortunately, we don't know who's connecting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my daughter, you talking about Amanda, gave me chills because obviously my daughter's a teenager at the moment and she's, we've had a few rough times. There's been some cyberbullying. There's even, there's been, and all that I know and all that I've told her and all that we've had, all the conversations and all the supervision, there has been a few people try to, get her to send nudes. They've tried to, she's had strangers pop up on her Snapchat, all of the things. And only through the fact that I have always talked about this stuff from a very young age, I think from about 7 or 8, that we started talking about stranger danger online and that there's people. And I didn't shy away from those conversations because I knew what I knew from my job, right? And, I'm sure that if Amanda had known more, because at the time you didn't know what we know now. But, now we know. I mean, back in 2008, when Amanda got online, or around 2009, my daughter was just born. And I remember, joining the police in 2010, and it was only just starting to become a problem. Like, predators go where children are and they'll
Yes.
find them. They'll find them wherever they can find them, right? So, the thing is that it's of no fault of anyone's that we didn't know better, but we know better now and we got to do better now.
Well, the other important thing is that as parents and caregivers, we have to have the conversations and listen to our kids, right?
Mm,
And we have to encourage our kids to be able to come back to mom and dad, auntie, uncle, grandma, right? Caregivers. One of my main focuses that this year is identifying red flags. The red flags for bullying, cyberbullying, exploitation, sextortion, you name it, right? And making kids and parents aware of the red flags.
Quickly interrupting this episode to let you know that Kristi has a whole library full of resources to support you. If this podcast hits home for you and you want to learn more about cyber safety, abuse awareness and prevention, and how you can protect your children, head to the link in the show notes where you can access free downloads, informative guides, and courses relating to these topics. You can also order Kristi's book, Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention. If you want to join the fight against child sexual abuse, you can support Kristi to reach a wider audience by leaving a review on this podcast or sharing it with your community.
If we talk about the red flags and identify the red flags, and kids know about the red flags, when something happens and a recognition appears in their brain of a red flag, that's when we say, stop, block, and tell an adult, right?
mhm.
And so that's why it's really important that those red flags are talked about a lot, because kids don't know. They don't when they're younger or older, and predators are smart, right? They'll ask something in a way that doesn't appear to be breaching privacy or luring or grooming. But we have to give kids scenarios so that
Yeah.
they are more aware of these.
Yeah, I agree. Scenario, I mean, I did
And
it as a police officer. Scenario training was how we learned how to do things that we might come across when it happens in the real world. And really, it's just preparing you for the potentiality or the possibility of something.
and scenario playing, how we do that with our kids when they're old enough to walk and talk, right? um when we are teaching them how to walk across the street, we tell them to look both ways, listen for the cars, or if they're walking in a parking lot, look for the lights, all those things. But we aren't doing that enough
Mm.
when it comes to technology use in the digital world
Yeah.
with our kids.
I wonder if it's because parents are scared of like scaring their children. And from my experience, it's actually not scary for kids. What is scary is not knowing how to deal with something once it happens. So if they had the knowledge of how to deal with something, or like was able to identify the red flags of something before it got to that stage, they'd be like, oh, with I remember that. And they would do what they were taught to
Exactly.
do. And it's happened to my own daughter. So I know it works by talking through these scenarios and going, well, this is what you need to watch out for. And this is what happens. Or what could you do if this happened? Giving them an opportunity to
Yes.
work it out and then helping them, guiding them through it. And then when it does happen, they're so proud of themselves. They're like, guess what? I just got someone was trying to groom me and I blocked them. And, and you're like, well done. It's actually happened to me. My daughter was like, there was someone trying to groom me online, mum, and I blocked them. And I was like, oh, well done, and it wasn't scary for either of us because I knew that I'd given her the tools. And that's all it comes down to, is giving your kids the
Well,
tools.
that and for adults is becoming comfortable with the conversation. It's going to happen. I mean, we talk to our kids about safe sex, right? We
Some
talk to our
parents,
kids
some
about,
parents.
well, we should be talking to our kids when they become a certain age about drinking
Yeah.
and
Drugs.
what they shouldn't, and drugs, right? And those conversations happen a lot more than the online safety conversations. Maybe because it's it can be invisible at first,
Yeah.
right? Because when you talk to kids about drinking and driving, we have no qualms about saying what can happen. You get in a car accident, you could, lose the use of your limbs, you could die. But
well, there's so much education around, you've got to put your seatbelt on, you've got to do this, we don't throw our kids in a pool and say sink or swim. We teach them how to swim, we give them supervision, because we know they'll drown. And it's the same with the internet. They'll drown if they don't have it. So
but
tell me about
so hard.
I think because we have become so reliant on technology, and it's now become and no shame, blame, or anything or shade on parents, but technology has become a babysitter as well. And so it's so easy for us to just hand over a device to keep our kids, as young as 1 or 2 or 3 years old, and keep them entertained while we're busy. That, the consideration of that safety, it hasn't started when they're that age. So then it all of a sudden has run away from parents and run away from them. And then all of a sudden they're at 10, 11, 12, they've seen porn for the first time. They're dealing with problems that they didn't even consider, because they hadn't had, like, it's just happened to them. Whereas being proactive and having those conversations and having that awareness from a very young age, I think there's a shift, but it's not fast enough. And then we've also got a problem, I guess it's a challenge or a problem. We've now got a bunch of parents that were the first kids with phones and devices. And so they grew up with sharing everything online. I mean, if Amanda was still with us today, she would have been one of those parents. And so, growing up, sharing their whole lives with everyone. So now they're sharing their whole kids' lives online. And
did you see the article that came out of the New York Times yesterday?
No, tell me about it.
It's called Mom Influencers.
Yes,
and what they've done is they've put their children's lives online since babyhood.
Yeah.
Which
is so wrong.
Well, I'll try and get the article to share it with you, but the article shared the good and the bad. And so there were some mom influencers who have decided to take their kids totally off, or they won't show the faces of their kids. There was a story there that there were like boxes. They didn't show the pictures, but they described the pictures moms were putting up there. And some were of their 9-year-old daughter in a gold bikini, and daughters doing the splits during dancing or gymnastics. And then all the comments that
how is that not trafficking
under it?
In a way, like, how is that not exploitation of your own children?
That is exploitation in my mind when I thought of it, right?
It is.
There was a story of it was in the daughter's or the mother was talking about her daughter, and she had put her daughter's pictures up and videos all through her daughter's life. And it gave, when the daughter figured all this out, it gave the daughter less worth. And so now daughter is on OnlyFans, exploiting herself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not going to happen to every child, but that's a potentiality.
No.
And one of the things that I would like to point out about this, we're talking about public accounts, not private accounts, and that these mum influencers, they're using their children to basically cash in. And I do know some accounts where they have subscriptions where people can subscribe and get special content. And one of the things, and I'm sure you might have had this as well, Carol, when you're talking to young kids, one of the things that I have found when I'm in classrooms, and recently, just last couple of weeks ago, I had some young people say to me, my parents share photos online and I don't want them to. And because our young kids are getting digital literacy from much younger age, like from the minute, from the get-go,
I know.
And we talk about consent, and we talk about, that it's there forever, and, people can use your photos if you share it, and you don't have any control once it's on the internet. That's what we're talking to our kids about. So then they find out that their mums and dads are sharing photos of them online, and they're very upset about it. I don't know about you, but I have had kids who've said, how do I stop my mum and dad? They don't listen to me. Have you had any of the kids come to you about
Yeah.
that sort of stuff? Yeah. I thought you would.
Yes, it's happening up here. They're the kids, the students, young people, they're getting taught about media literacy and digital literacy and privacy and consent and exploitation, right? And they're a more aware generation. I truly believe that they will be a different kind of parent
Yes.
in 15, 20 years from now
Yes.
than maybe the generation right now that are sharing everything, because those adults with the 7 to 15-year-olds, right? They lived, this was their life.
Yeah.
Social media and oversharing. And I guess you become so ingrained, you still don't think it's bad unless something bad happens.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. And so one of the things that I like to talk to parents about is just what the impact can be on your kids if you overshare their information, the impact on their future. Because for instance, now we have such a massive thing with AI and the artificial, people are exploiting children's images. Sorry, that's my dog sitting in my office.
I saw, very cute.
Yeah, so they're exploiting children's images, and they're taking pictures from the internet, from people's Instagram, and what parent, I don't think any parent gives birth to a child and thinks, I don't care what happens to them in the future. Like, that most parents give birth to their kids. They love them from birth. They want them to grow up healthy, strong, and happy, and have their own futures. So as parents, we need to have a little bit of a think and go, how do we make that happen in this current digital environment where everything we do is online? And I think as a police officer, I was very I guess everything I did was potentially, I was very aware of that from my daughter's young age, because she was 2 when I joined. Everything I did as a police officer, because I was wearing a uniform or I was wearing some sort of badge or whatever, was seen in the public eye, and I had to always behave and act in a certain way. So I would never do anything like that. But there's certainly, my daughter was 2008. There's certainly photos that I wish I'd never posted of her back, when she was very young, when I didn't know better. I mean, and it's not until you know better, then you can do better. So I have to give myself some grace and say, it's okay, Kristi, you didn't know better back then, but now we know better. And I don't share any photos of my daughter in any public way anymore. She's 16 now, and she gets to choose whether she gets her photo shared or not. But it's, again, about consent, right? So we talk about consent with our kids, and we should be talking about it in our families as well.
Oh, 100%, right? The consent word can travel in all different areas, and we do need to get into practice of asking, and kids need to be asking each other if they can share photos.
Yeah.
And with the AI and the deep fakes, it's just there's a whole nother sector to learn about, right? And I think that with AI it's been a year and a few months, right, that it has really caught on out there. But the offenders out there are 10 steps ahead of us,
of course,
in terms of what they're doing, right? And we can't get all of them. And I know that in Canada, they're going to table next week a online harms bill. Whether it will pass in the tabling because the opposition doesn't like it, we don't know. But Australia and the UK and the EU were listed as countries that already have something in place and have gone through a few changes as it's like happening. You consider it a living document bill, right? And Canada hasn't even got one yet. But one of my biggest fears is that when we have those in place, I don't want parents to think that their children are 100% safe
No, there won't be.
just because there's legislation. All the other stuff still needs to happen. The conversations, the learning, the teaching, and as technology continues to, what we know today, next weekend, there'll be changes.
Yeah.
There'll be advancement. There'll be new ways for offenders to find our kids. We always have to keep up with what's out there, and it's a daunting, exhausting task.
It is. It is. But that's why you follow people like us. You keep in, you just got to keep your thumb on the pulse. Whilst your kids are only young for a certain amount of time, right? I don't know. I know that it's exhausting because I've been there, I've done that, but it's also worth it because when your kids come out the other side of it and they're, they manage to get there. And unfortunately, not all kids manage to get there. And we just want them to get there.
Well, another thing that I've been finding out. So last December, I was invited to go to NCMEC in Virginia, right? And I was able to speak to their board of directors. And I also found out, like, there's the fear of missing out. Our generation is or the adults are fearful of missing out, and the doom scrolling, right? Finding out what other people are doing. But all the doom scrolling is creating mental health, is creating anxiety. Why can't I be like that? Or how come they're on vacation or whatever? But there's another part that's called the joy of missing out, JOMO.
Really?
And yes, you can just Google it. It's a thing. And there's kids now, young adults and teens that want to JOMO. They're happy to miss out. They're turning off their social media. They're turning off their notifications because they have realized they need a break. That their own, because we're talking about mental health more, and we're talking about anxiety more, right? And we're talking about sleep deprivation. We're talking about not eating healthy. We're talking about all those other kinds of things. And now it's all sort of coming together for the younger generation.
Yeah.
And so we only hope that they are more able to turn off.
Well, hopefully it balances itself out eventually. Like, hopefully that the amount of education and awareness that our young people have, that it'll balance itself out with help from adults and parents and schools and all of the support networks, hopefully. But just for anyone who was wondering what NCMEC means, it's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children over in the US. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And they're amazing in what they do. They've got a cyber tip line that you can actually report child exploitation on. They do filter things through to other places, but in Australia we obviously have our own reporting lines. But for anyone listening overseas, because I do have some overseas listeners, NCMEC is one of the ones, and it's a cyber tip line that you can send stuff to. But it's interesting because that JOMO stuff, like, I know about FOMO, but JOMO. So one of the things my daughter actually mentioned to me was, she goes, "Mum, kids don't want to get together anymore. They don't want to spend time actually in the same room together." She's like, "I feel like our generation's screwed because we don't like each other." and I'm like, I think it's actually more about the fact that you don't know how to be and how to interact together, and it's easy to interact online for you. And that's where I feel that it's really important. And for anyone with young children who are, trying to navigate this new world of, children devices, do I get a device? They need to make friends in real life first, and they need to learn how to interact with other kids. So by giving them a device and letting them game, and yes, there is so much. My daughter has found so much joy from gaming, and I've online gamed with her, but we need to help them navigate, like, have some balance. So as much time as they spend online, they need to be offline doing things like running around outside. I'm talking kids under the age of 12, by the way, running around outside, playing, learning, being bored, so that we need to have a little bit of balance.
Oh, that's a conversation, because kids do not know how to unbore themselves. That's like the buzzword, I'm bored, and then, oh, well, go and
Play on your iPad.
go on your Xbox. Right.
Yeah.
But you know what? We need to, how many young kids know hopscotch or
Skipping rope or
Foursquare
whatever.
or skipping or even the Chinese, the skipping with the elastic bands, right?
Yeah, elastics.
Things that, I mean, I'm way older than you, but
No,
things that you
I had
do
all those things.
outside.
Yeah, I had all those things. You know,
But
even like
those are
playing
things
pool
that,
or ping pong tables, or, you know, any of those old school, you know, games that we used to play around with family and cousins and friends, and, you know, all of those things.
Monopoly, playing the game of life, like board games,
I
right?
still play board games
Kids
with my
need
family.
and that's one of the recommended things for family time is, like, sure, you can watch a movie, right? But get out now we have to call them old-fashioned board games, right? But it brings conversation, it brings laughter, it brings, and put all the technology away. You can't play a board game with
your phone.
technology at the table, right?
No. Yeah.
Having dinner time, having a meal time without technology at the table.
Yeah.
Right? We have to, it's sad, but we have to create those
Moments.
kinds of moments now. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen, like, when you go to a restaurant, you see a family of 4 and they're all hunched over looking at their screens
Yeah.
I was at a restaurant and there was a mom and 2 kids, and the 2 kids were on their devices and mom was just eating her meal solitary.
Quietly on your own. Yeah, I do that. And so when I go with my family, and I have my husband and my daughter both have ADHD. So they, you know, their brains work differently. So we tend to put our phones away or leave them in the car, or just say, like, everyone's phones away, we're having dinner. And it's a conscious effort. We have to make a conscious effort, because it's so easy to just pick your phone up and just start scrolling and checking your messages and stuff. And, you know, so I totally understand that. But one of the things I would like to say, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that my own daughter, I restricted social media until she was in high school. After, you know, we did the work, we talked about it. She had to do a project where she talked about the app she wanted, which was TikTok at the time, and she had to tell me the pros and cons, and she had to say, you know, how long she was allowed to use it for, and she had to come up with this whole project and present it to me and my husband. And I did that purely because if she really wanted it and she did the work, then she would have learned something, and she would understand the repercussions of what these things are. So that wasn't until she was 13, 12 and a half, 13. And it's only recently she said to me, Mum, I'm so glad that you didn't let me have social media earlier. And she's 16. So for her to come back to me and say, it's okay, I'm glad that you made me wait. I hated you at the time because everyone else had it. But I really am glad, because I had more of a childhood. So for any parents out there that are struggling with their 8, 9, 10-year-old or 12-year-old who are like, they want social media because everyone else seems to have it. It's okay to have your own rules in your own house and to stand fast in your beliefs and let your kids have a childhood, because they will thank you for it. Because once they're on it, they either go one of 2 ways. They go down that FOMO or they go down that JOMO, you know. So yeah, please know that you can take the time out and say no, explain why you're saying no, explain the reasons, and then, you know, try and find ways to do it so that you can all enjoy it.
And parents also need to understand, or they can share with their child, right? So when you're getting a device for your child, that device still belongs to the adult.
Yes.
Right? And anything that transpires on that device, it becomes the adult's responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So if it's nefarious, who's law enforcement going to talk to? They're going to talk to the parents, because that's who really owns the device.
Yeah.
And so one of my suggestions is, like, if you're going to give a device to someone who's younger than 12, right? It's a family device.
Yeah.
And so with a family device, mom and dad have access to it. If there's something, if your child is saying, no, you can't look, then there's something
Yeah.
obviously there that should be looked at.
Yeah.
So you have to look at that red flag, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just before we finish, you mentioned the red flags, and I'm sure the parents listening would be like, oh, what were the red flags? So, and I know there's lots of red flags, but what are the main red flags that you see or you know of when it comes to sextortion or bullying? Or, I mean, they must be pretty similar in some ways because it all involves technology and it's probably technology related. So what are some of the red flags that you teach parents?
Well, the red flags for like the bullying, the cyberbullying, are a bit different because
Okay.
it comes to knowing your child and your child's regular behaviors, right? And so if you see changes in your child's personality, this is with bullying and cyberbullying, whether all of a sudden they're hyperactive or not active enough, right? They're sleeping too long or not sleeping enough. They're eating too much or not eating enough. They're irritable, they're argumentative, just changes in behavior. Then you know something's happening, and it's time to have that conversation. With the exploitation and sextortion, sort of the same baseline behaviors because the anxiety and comes into play, the fearfulness, because usually if there's exploitation happening, the exploiter will say, you can't tell your adults, right? Your parents, or else I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to find your house and I'm going to hurt them. And the kids get scared, right? Or embarrassed. I know many kids that have self-harmed because they're wanting to hurt themselves and not hurt the adults around them by
they're trying to
sharing
protect
that
the
information.
adults.
Yeah. And then with exploitation and grooming, there's luring, there's the love bombing, the offender at the other end is saying how much they care about this person, they want to meet this person. That they're gifting if the child is on Roblox, they're giving Robux and things like that. So that's part of the luring and the trust process. One of the things a parent can do is, if you want to know what the red flags for exploitation are or for cyberbullying, go on ChatGPT. I'm actually saying go on AI and type in the question, what are the red flags for exploitation? And it will come up with 15 of them.
Yeah. Okay. That's good tool.
Right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's using the tool for good, and it's using the tool to learn.
Yeah.
There are, as I said, there's good sides and there's bad sides. When the internet was created, and I remember back in the day, because I'm older, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was attached to my phone landline, and if you picked up the receiver of the phone, your internet dropped.
Yes.
Right?
I'm older. I'm that old too.
And so look where we've gone in 30 years. And so where are we going to go in the next? I won't be around for the next anyways, what will happen in the next 20 years? And so we sort of have to deal with the now and keep our kids safe. And keeping the kids safe is keeping families safe. But our kids are the next generation of leaders.
Yeah.
And we want them to go into young adulthood. We want them to get into young adulthood, but without the fear of not getting into university or college or getting a job because of what has been shared about them on the internet, or what they've shared on the internet, or what their parents have shared about them on the internet. It only takes a couple of comments, and recruiters for jobs and recruiters for post-secondary are going and looking on the internet now. And it doesn't matter if your account's private, because once someone hashtags you or tags you, it can go into the global cybersphere, right?
Yeah.
For all to see. So just because, say, your Facebook or your account's locked to private doesn't keep you safe, because we've all learned how to screen capture too.
Yeah. So very true. I think that's a good place to wind up. My last question though is after everything that you've been through, it's been a long 11 years for you and your family, and you've turned a tragedy into something that is helping. Well, Amanda did this, and you just helped keep the flame alight and share her legacy. So what would you, after everything, what would you like parents to know that you know now?
Well, one, give your kids huge hugs and huge kisses, right? And tell them that you care about them from the time they were born to the time that as they grow older, and you will always be there for them. And to have those honest conversations, and some of them might be hard, but they are very much needed. And to share with kids that they can come to you as a trusted adult, as a parent, as a caregiver, anytime.
Yeah.
Right? If they need help. Doesn't even have to be online related. It can be anything related, right? And to build that relationship will keep them safer. It will make them adults in this world that can thrive, right? Because we have to thrive and survive, and we have to be more resilient. And part of that resiliency is part of, I guess, the learning that has to happen. I know that, the human brain doesn't fully develop until 25 to 28 years old. And so when you put that into perspective, and we're putting technology in the hands of 13-year-olds, their brain's only half developed.
Yeah.
And that's developing to logical thinking, critical thinking, rational thinking. We have to really think deep about that. We also have to make sure that we talk to our kids about respect, about empathy, about their moral compass, about right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think we're forgetting about all that stuff, especially when it comes to the bullying and the cyberbullying, and how to deal with it if it comes directly at you. We don't know what the life of the person who is dishing out the hate,
Yeah.
the words, the bullying or the cyberbullying. We don't know what's going on in their lives, right? And so we have to really think about that empathetically before we attack back.
Yeah. Yeah, good points.
And in the old days, right? You just drop it and you go home. You just drop it, and if it continues, you have your safe and trusted adults.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add to that is that, when they're little, you have to hug them, you protect them from the world. And just because they get to 13 or 12 and you still have to protect them from the world. And that, unfortunately, that world is now encompassing in a little tiny device. But what we need to remember is that they're not yet got their shields and their barriers and their force fields up yet. So we need to help them by protecting them. And one of the conversations I always had and still have with my daughter is some things are for adults to deal with, and bullying and cyberbullying and sextortion or anything like that is for an adult to help you with, because you haven't got the tools yet to deal with it on your own. And I think that's
I'm going to send you some links of some really short, good virtue video clips.
Yeah, cool.
And
I'll
what
add
it
them
does is it makes your heart feel all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we need, is in a world of, when you turn on your computer and you see the news. I mean, the news is made to be all bad and negative. You don't see very many warm and fuzzy stories, but we need to embrace the warm and fuzzy videos and stories out there.
Yes, that's what We
It's a
do. We
heartwarmer.
need both. We need both. We need the reality, but we need the escapism as well. So yeah, I'll add them to the bottom of the podcast in the podcast show notes. But Carol, thank you so much. So how can people, I know that we've mentioned it, go on to amandatoddlegacy.org. That's where you can look up Amanda's video, and you can see it's 8.5 minutes. It's her own video that she created before she passed, and it is a very impactful video. It's been played how many times now?
About 50 million cumulative.
Yeah.
Right. So people had copied it and put it on, and we've been able to get them all down, right? Because we don't want anyone making a monetary gain from Amanda's story. And then the website, the Legacy website, also has resources, right?
Yeah.
Resources for cyberbullying, resources for exploitation, support lines for mental health. And I decided not to just put resources for Canada, so I've put global resources.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for talking to us. And I would really highly recommend any parents out there to have a look at Amanda's video and maybe have a talk with your kids about Amanda's story, because it is an impactful story. And as you've shared with us, kids are listening because it's a real story and they can relate to what happened. So it's going to have more impact than maybe talking about the boogeyman and saying, don't do this because strangers. It's an actual real story that has the real impact on kids, and it could make a difference. So thank you so much, Carol. And I really am so grateful for you taking your time out of your Saturday afternoon to jump on and have a chat with me.
Thank you for having me. I hope that one day we can meet in person again.
Well, maybe I'll come and visit you in Canada.
Oh, yeah. Please do. I have a bedroom for you to stay in.
That would be fantastic. All right, see ya. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Education empowers children and empowers parents, and education prevents abuse. That is why I'm here, and that is why you are here. So thank you. If you want any further information or support, follow me on social media, either under Kristi McVie or Cape AU social media accounts. I'll put the links in the show notes. You can also purchase a signed copy of my book, Operation Kids Safe, via the website at www.cape-au.com. Also on my website is a free ebook titled 10 Tips to Keep Your Kids Safe from Abuse, and self-paced courses for parents to help you in your journey of child abuse prevention. Please see the show notes for any extra information, links and help should you be looking for extra support. Thank you once again for giving a shit about preventing child sexual abuse. See you next time.